Good afternoon. Welcome. My name is Reverend Abhijan Amanchi, and I serve as one of the ministers at Cedar Lane Unitarian Universalist Congregation. It is a deep honor to be with you today as we gather to celebrate the life and legacy of love of Harold Quayle Jr., a life of depth and generosity, rich with music, learning, and love. On behalf of Harold's family, his son Hal and his wife Mary, his daughters Liza and her husband Craig, and Meredith and her husband Brian, along with his grandchildren, great-grandchildren, nieces, nephews, and his Cedar Lane family, I extend a warm welcome to all of you. Your presence here today is a testament to the love that Harold gave and received and the wide circle of connection that surrounded him. If this is your first time in a Unitarian Universalist congregation, please don't be scared. We welcome you. Ours is a liberal religious tradition grounded not in creed, but in covenant, the promises we make to journey together in love, to seek meaning, and to care for one another. So when we gather to grieve, we do not do so just to offer final answers, but to honor and celebrate a life well lived, to share stories, and to make room for sorrow, for gratitude, and the enduring presence of love. So this afternoon, we will remember Harold with music, lots of music, with memory and reflection. We will recall his warmth, his voice rising in harmony, his thoughtful teaching, and his deep devotion to family and community. While no single hour can capture the fullness of 93 years, we hope this time together will help us carry his spirit forward with courage, with kindness, and with care. Let us begin then with a gesture of sacred remembrance. In our Unitarian Universalist tradition, we kindle the chalice as a symbol of memory, love, and community. Today, the chalice represents the shared space we create in grief and gratitude, the web of connection that Harold helped to weave and that now holds us in return. So as Harold's great-grandchildren come forward to kindle our chalice, come on up. And they do so with some adult supervision. I invite us to rise in body and or in spirit. And join together to share the words that are printed in your order of service. Let us share together. At times, our own light goes out and is rekindled by a spark from another person. Each of us has cause to think with deep gratitude of those who have lighted the flame within us. We light this chalice in loving memory of our friend and spiritual companion, Harold Quayle. May this flame honor the love. Keep going.
May it signify the community we create
sharing together. Amen. Please be seated. Thank you. You all were great. Let's give them a big hand. All right. Harold Quayle Jr. lived 93 vibrant years. A life steeped in music, family, curiosity, generosity, and deep-rooted love. Born in Wilmington, North Carolina in 1931, Harold grew up in Suffolk, Virginia, and graduated from Suffolk High School in 1949. He went on to the University of Virginia, where he earned a degree in biology with a minor in chemistry in 1953. Now, that might sound like the start of a quiet academic path, but Harold's life would be anything but ordinary. After graduation, Harold was drafted into the U.S. Army and trained as a medical aidman. He was stationed at Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio, Texas, where he served in the parade band of the Medical Training Center. That experience, he later wrote, was, and I quote, "my first significant departure from the white, segregated middle-class society I had been a part of for the first 22 years of my life." It laid the groundwork for the ideals of tolerance and understanding that became central to his teaching, worldview, and his life. After completing his service, Harold resumed studies at George Washington University and then UVA, but it wasn't until a wise counselor suggested that he try teaching that he found his calling. He applied for a job in Calvert County, Maryland, and was hired as a high school music teacher, teaching 3 junior high general music classes, a girls' glee club, and 1 chemistry class. And it was there that Harold discovered what so many would come to know. He was a gifted, deeply devoted educator. In 1961, he joined Montgomery County Public Schools and spent more than 30 years at Wheaton High School. How many of you are Wheaton High graduates? All right. Teaching chemistry and later photography. In 1979, he transitioned to teaching photography full-time, turning a long-time passion into a celebrated career. He was nominated for Best Teacher in 1989, and his students won numerous regional and state awards. Harold also served on the board of the Montgomery County Education Association, represented Maryland at the National Education Association conventions, and was a tireless advocate for public education and professional equity. But long before the classrooms and committee meetings, there was love. Harold met a young nursing student named Martha Zimmerman at the UVA hospital cafeteria, where he worked a summer job. They called it the luckiest accident of their lives. They married in 1954 and began a 62-year-old love story filled with music, family, travel, and deep partnership. Harold's love for Martha was quiet but radiant, a love that deepened across the decades and endured through her passing. And together they raised 3 children, Hal, Liza, and Meredith, in Montgomery County. Family camping trips carried them from Florida to Colorado to the Canadian Maritimes, and later Harold and Martha traveled to Europe, including a golden anniversary celebration in southern France. Harold's life had a soundtrack. A passionate amateur bass, he sang with the Washington Cathedral Choral Society for nearly 50 years. He and Martha were devoted fans of opera and chamber music, traveling to performances across the state and country. Their love of the arts filled their home with music and beauty, and their walls with carefully framed prints. Harold, always hands-on, did most of the framing himself. And he brought that same care into the kitchen. A dedicated member of Cedar Lane's Gourmet Club, Harold was a beloved cook, always eager to share a good meal, and I can attest to that. And for more than 62 years, he was a faithful and generous member of Cedar Lane Unitarian Universalist congregation. He sang in the choir, served as interim youth choir director, and marched in the 1963 March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. He supported causes like Common Cause, Amnesty International, and People for the American Way. Harold was predeceased by his beloved wife, Martha, his grandson, Alan Hammack Jr., his siblings, Cynthia and Frederick, and his parents. He is survived by his children, their spouses, his grandchildren, Emily, her husband Philip, Landon, Chia, Britton, and Ashley, and Devon, and 6 great-grandchildren, Emery, Chase, Penelope, Olivia, Stella, and it's 9 now, 8, and Lucille, and many nieces and nephews. What's the name of the latest? There we go, Desmond and Cameron. As we say goodbye today, let us not only grieve the absence of Harold's presence, but celebrate this abundant, rich life he lived. A life of teaching and listening, of loving and learning, of beauty and service and song. May his memory be a blessing, and may the music he loved so dearly continue in each of us. And to that, I invite you to rise in body or in spirit to sing, "Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing," number 126.
Unique passionate, kind, thoughtful, engaging, curious, warm, smart, positive, cheerful, lived well, great love of life. These are just some of the words written about my dad in the weeks following his death. I wish you could have read all the wonderful comments, emails, and cards received from friends, family, former students, and colleagues and acquaintances all over the country and even farther away. I attended a Chesapeake music concert in February that several of my parents' friends in Easton sponsored to honor Mom and Dad and their long history with Chesapeake music, spanning over 3 decades. For years, I had heard about the annual music festivals in Easton that Mom and Dad never missed. They talked about the chamber music concerts, the musicians, and the friends that they got to know. I had the opportunity over the past 6 years to attend concerts with Dad and meet the people I had only heard about for years. I would like to read some of what was written about my dad by longtime musician friends with Chesapeake Music. These thoughts were shared at the beginning of the concert in February. It's impossible to sum up a whole life, especially someone who had such a long one with so many varied passions and activities. It is hard to think of anyone who loved music in all its forms as much as Harold did. His curiosity about music and musicians was endless, and his passion was infectious. Conversations with him were always sprinkled with musical memories, festival stories, repertoires, and tales of musicians he admired. Harold was a musician at heart. Hal and Martha traveled long distances to hear his favorite musicians play and sing, and he befriended them too. He was a wonderful conversationalist on non-musical subjects too, and had strong opinions, always graciously expressed, on books, theater, politics, and travel. His enthusiasm and his open embrace of the many-faceted world of art and culture, especially chamber music, will be missed. Hal and Martha really knew how to connect with people, all people, forming sincere relationships through curiosity and empathy. Chesapeake music was just one of the many passions my parents shared. I feel fortunate that my dad shared this passion with me over the past 6 years.
It has been said that we die twice. The first death comes when our body finally gives out. The second and final death comes when there's no one left to tell our story. We gather here to acknowledge Harold's first death and to forestall his second by telling his stories.
Thank you all for being here. I'm not great at telling stories or anything like that, so I decided to write a poem about my grandfather so my children can relate. So Grandpa was truly one of a kind, a unique man with an intellectual mind. He would take time to teach us about Beethoven and Mozart, while most kids our age were learning to race on Mario Kart. Instead of sleepovers with morning cartoons, we would wake to the sound of horns and bassoons. To the National Cathedral we'd go every December to hear Grandpa sing with the other choir members. Although music was a big part of his life, I think what he enjoyed more than anything was his wife. He and Grandma loved to dine on fine wine and fine food, but he'd be the first to let you know that the waitstaff was rude. Weekend getaways to the Blue Ridge cabin by the stream, no TV, no internet, just the family. What a dream. Train rides in Cass, and from Durango to Silverton, his last was the best, with Santa and great grand little ones. I will miss all of our visits to Sedgwick number 4, Thanksgivings, birthdays, anniversaries, and more. I'm grateful for all of the memories we shared together. In our hearts and our minds, you'll live on forever.
Okay, I'm going to try and get through this without breaking down, but I wasn't so good at that earlier today. I'm incredibly fortunate to be able to say that Harold Quayle Jr., or as I knew him, Uncle Hal, was my uncle for nearly 58 years. He, along with his brother Freddie Quayle, were my mother's brothers. Outside of my parents, Uncle Hal is the person most responsible for helping shape who I am today, and the person that I hopefully continue to strive to be. My first memories of Uncle Hal are of him wearing a white bucket hat, driving a VW microbus loaded down with Martha, Liza, Hallie, and Meredith. He told these amazing stories of the wonderful places they had visited in that microbus, all the way from the maritime provinces of Canada out to Colorado. I continue to hear stories about these road trips and the many other kinds of trips he and Martha took, all the way to the last time I saw him back in July, when he told us things we needed to see and do at the next destination on my family's road trip, including his cottage in Dogwood Valley and his old room, number 42, on the West Lawn at the University of Virginia. I get my love of road trips from Uncle Hal. I learned that the journey can and should be just as fun and interesting as the destination. I wouldn't say that his motto was, have a good time all of the time, but it was something close to that. He always seemed to bring the best out of wherever he was and whoever he was with. There were two things that really stand out for me about Uncle Hal. The first was the passionate interest he took in such a wide range of topics and things in life. Art, food, wine, photography, travel, cooking, opera, choir, bluegrass, jazz, politics, public radio, and I'm just getting started. His passion was infectious, and it helped open me up to so many things that are now important parts of my life. While I was well-fed at home growing up, Uncle Hal was the person who opened my eyes, nose, and taste buds to gourmet food, wine, craft beer, and the wonderful world of cheese beyond American and cheddar. Many people I know talk about craft beer as if it is something relatively new. I have to bite my tongue to stop from correcting them and telling them, I was drinking craft beer with my uncle back in the late 1980s, and we weren't just drinking great beer, he had it paired with cheese that brought tears to my eyes. It was my wife who first got me to try a raw oyster, perhaps after a few too many of those craft beers. But it was Uncle Hal who took my oyster appreciation to amazing heights. He would regularly send me pictures of the oysters he and Martha were sharing at the Old Ebbett Grill or the Oyster Bar in Grand Central Station. Once I moved to the oyster-producing province of New Brunswick, I was able to respond in kind. Who knew there were so many different kinds of oysters with such a wide range of different flavor profiles? Who knew that the Totten Inlet virginica is just a Crassotrea virginica transplanted from the East Coast to the West Coast? Who knew the difference between diploid and triploid oysters? Uncle Hal did, and he was very happy to expound at length on these and many other topics. His passion opened my eyes to so many other things as well, including different kinds of music like jazz and bluegrass. Sadly, even he couldn't get me to appreciate opera, although that never stopped him from trying. His infectious passion also extended to people, and this brings me to the second thing I most appreciated about Hal. The enduring and earnest interest in the people around him and his ability to establish and maintain meaningful relationships with such a wide range of different people, young and old. When he spoke to you, it was clear that he was talking to you, not through you. He never appeared eager to get on to the next conversation with someone else. He made you feel like you were the only person he was interested in speaking to at that moment. His ability to engage with people is probably what made him such a wonderful teacher, resulting in former students of his maintaining connections with him as long as 50 years after their graduation. Or I could phrase that another way, he maintained connections with his former students for 50 years. It seemed like every time I spoke with Uncle Hal, he was telling me about some new person or group of people he had met that he was now spending time and doing things with. He also seemed to frequently tell me about reconnecting with people he had known decades in the past that he had tracked down on Facebook. This was a man who had a busier social schedule in his 90s than most of us had in our 20s. As a clinical psychologist, I often refer to social connection as mental health gold. Good social connections help us better tolerate life's inevitable slings and arrows. By this mental health gold standard, Uncle Hal has to be one of the most prosperous people I've ever known. I'm almost done. In August 2019, several months after Martha's passing, he traveled up to New Brunswick to visit me and my family. I wasn't sure how he would be, as Martha's absence had taken quite a toll on him. I have this wonderful picture from the first night he was there of him, all of my family, and several of our friends who we had just met, sitting on our deck having a wonderful time. My friends still talk of this vibrant and engaging man who seemed so full of life. The rest of the trip continued along the same lines. He and I traveled all over New Brunswick and Prince Edward Island, and every place we went, he engaged and charmed people, from my friends and family to people working in the restaurants that we ate at, to the park rangers at Prince Edward Island National Park who were mesmerized by his stories of having visited the very same campsite 50 years prior with Martha, Liza, Hallie, and Meredith, and that VW microbus. I have so many amazing memories of the 10 days that we spent together. The best was sitting at Carr's Oyster Bar in Stanley Bridge, Prince Edward Island. I'll get through this. Eating some freshly shucked oysters. When the waitress came over to see how we liked them, he asked her, "Where do these oysters come from?" And she pointed out the window towards the bay next to us and told him, "Over there, about 200 yards away from where you're sitting." She left, and he sat quiet for a few moments, and then told me, "I think these are the best oysters I've ever had." He told me later on in the trip that he had worried he would never feel happy again with Martha gone, but that he had started to experience some brighter moments in the weeks and days before the trip and during his visit with us. I know that he never fully got over the loss of his wife, but it meant the world to me to be a part of helping to bring some brightness and positivity back into the life of this man who brought so many wonderful things into mine. My family and I are fortunate to have a number of beautiful works of art, photographs that Uncle Hal took, and prints that he framed in our house. Every day they remind me of Uncle Hal and what a wonderful person he was and how much I miss him. Thank you to all of you for coming here today to help celebrate the life and memory of this wonderful man. Oh, and now I would like to ask my cousin, Mac Quayle, to come play some music for us.
Like Rice, I called Hal Uncle Hal. He was my father's brother, and his deep love of music was expressed in many ways, but one of them was playing the piano. And so Liza reached out to me a little while ago and asked if I would play this piece that he often would play at the piano. She sent me a video, and she promised to send me the sheet music and find out what it was. But that promise was not kept. And I played it for some people too, supposedly very knowledgeable about that style of music. No one knew. So I transcribed it, and I've kind of just worked up my own interpretation to honor Hal's deep love of music.
Maybe if we sat down longer, Mac would play that again. That was fabulous. I loved it. I'm very happy to be here to talk about Hal's musical life. Hal made music, he studied music, he made friends in music, and every step of the way he enjoyed music. Hal's musical life started about that age at full speed. As a teenager, he attended the National Music Camp at Interlochen, Michigan. This is a sleepaway camp that lasts for 8 weeks. And Hal went there 2 summers. He studied piano, he sang in the festival choir, and one night he danced in a conga line through the camp behind the founder of the place, Joseph Maddie, to celebrate the end of World War II. I think the profession of music wanted Hal. He went in his military service, turned into playing the drums. His first teaching job was as a music teacher, as you've heard. And after he moved here to teach chemistry and photography, he continued to sing in choirs. He sang in the choir here at Cedar Lane, and especially in the Washington Cathedral Choral Society, performing symphonic works in important places. Hal deeply adored the Benjamin Britten War Requiem. I think he wanted me to say that. Along with his music making, Hal explored chamber music and opera. Hal and Martha traveled great distances to see chamber performances, to attend famous operas, new productions of overlooked operas. Closer to home, they were early champions of the Chesapeake Chamber Music Festival. He was an ambitious student in the audience, studying the music, the text, the composers, and especially the performers. He remembered performers. He corresponded with them, met them again at different places, and became friends with them. Hal and Martha shared all this as wandering scholars, cheerful pilgrims, traveling great distances. This was all well underway when Jane and I moved into the neighborhood 28 years ago. When Hal asked how I came to live in the area, I told him I came in my earlier career to teach at the University of Maryland as the director of opera. He flashed his smile and he said, "Yes, I like opera too." That was a massive understatement that he liked opera. And it was optimistic to assume that I still liked opera. But once we realized that we both had spent several summers at Interlochen, we were musical buddies from that moment on. When he learned that I had composed 2 operas, he wanted to see the scores and video recordings. And the next thing I knew, Jane and I were invited to the living room at 4 Cedric Lane with some other neighbors to watch one of my operas. Hal didn't pick the breezy half-hour comedy. He picked the full-length drama based on a novel called The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. During intermission, another resident of Cedric Lane, Dan Press, mentioned that he also read that book in college, and it led him to restructure his entire professional life. So 2 of the dearest friendships I've ever enjoyed were established in one afternoon. We were experiencing Hal's gift for blending music and friendship. And when you get friendship and music sloshing around together, you've got some very powerful forces going. And that's the energy that Hal carried with him all the time. After Martha passed away, Hal and I ventured out to midday chamber music string quartet concerts at the NIH campus. From the shuttle bus, he would show me the building that Martha lived in during her early career. When we reached the auditorium, Hal wanted to sit right up front, and it was a very special social circle right there. At home, over the years, Hal and Martha had developed their living room into an electronic concert hall. We spent several afternoons together there, carefully attending wonderful opera performances recorded on laser disc, including works by Benjamin Britten, Mozart, Wagner, and one of Hal's favorite composers, Erich Wolfgang Korngold. For me, going over there, I felt like Tom Sawyer when he said, "It was the best fun I ever had in my life and the most intellectual." Some of those operas are pretty long, so we'd go through them one act at a time. Hal kept track of which opera we were working through and which act we'd gone through, and he did that for other friends that he was also sharing operas with. When we reached the end of Korngold's The Miracle of Heliana, when the lovers are united after their deaths and transmigrate into paradise together, I was right there with them. I was flabbergasted. I felt as if I was coming out of a trance, that I'd reconnected with everything I ever loved about opera with deeper appreciation. I looked over to check in on how Hal was doing. He'd seen that piece many times, but he was as transported as I was. He actually apologized for it. He was wiping tears out of his eyes, and he said, "I'm sorry, but that part always gets to me." I'm grateful to have known Harold Quayle for the enrichment he brought to my life. I think he showed all of us how to enjoy this world while you're in it. I'm very happy to be with you today. Thank you.
Good afternoon. This is for the Quayle family. This poem came to my attention when my father died. Oh, thank you. When my father died in 1993. He gave me solace to read it at his funeral and later at my mother's funeral in 2012. If it sounds familiar, you'll recall I read it at the Celebration of Life for your mother in 2019. It continues to bring me peace when I read it, even for myself from time to time. It refreshes my perspective on life and beyond. Your beloved father, Hal, lived a rich, full life, but it's never the right time to say goodbye. I hope it brings you peace and comfort now in your time of loss. This is cantata number 82, Ich habe genug. Pardon my German, but it translates to It Is Enough, by J.S. Bach. It is enough, for now with mine eyes I have seen thy salvation, which thou hast prepared for our consolation. He is the Redeemer and Savior. Thy word I believe, and trusting thy promise, my heart is at rest. Today, shouldst thou call me, with gladness would I take my departure. It is enough. It is enough. My trust is in the Lord. I know that he is mine, and I would be with him. His promise I believe, thus shall I share the Simeon, the joy of everlasting life, and in that hope shall I depart. For all the sins and errors of my life, dear Lord, forgive me. Ah, it is enough. Thy mercy is my hope. With joy I bid the world farewell. It is enough. Slumber on, O weary spirit, softly, calmly take thy rest. World, farewell, no longer here I stay, where my soul no peace can find, naught sorrow, pain, and anguish compass me about on every side. Here I must in sadness languish, but I know my beloved Savior's bosom there is rest. With gladness will I now depart. My work is done, my journey ended, therefore with joy I will depart. Ah, my work is ended. My glad heart with joy shall sing when I cast off the bonds which bind me. My God, oh, let me now depart, my troubles over, my journey ended. In the cool earth let me be laid, the gentle earth from which I came. My farewell now is spoken. World, good night. Hal departed this life, but his spirit lives on in your hearts and all the hearts he touched. Blessings and may peace be with you. I do have a few personal recollections from having the pleasure and good fortune of knowing Hal since 1972, when I moved to number 3 Sedgwick Lane. The Quayle family had moved to number 4 Sedgwick Lane in 1968. You may not need my name as Jim Caskey, it's on the program. My wife Barbara and I live across the street. At a time when many folks don't even know their neighbors' names, we have been blessed with knowing our good neighbors, Hal and Martha, for over 50 years. We looked out for each other's property, newspapers, mail, and trash when our respective families were away. It's hard to think of Hal without remembering his lovely wife, Martha, because they were such a good team, and we enjoyed many wonderful times at their house. Their Christmas Eve gatherings were indeed a community affair where we were able to enjoy homemade quiche, see other neighbors, and renew our friendships with the rest of the Quayle family. We always felt at home and part of the family. It's quite appropriate that cherry trees were recently in full bloom and the blossoms now are fading. Hal was very protective of the aging trees, planted when Lux Manor was begun in the early 1930s. Excuse me. When new neighbors were about to trim the trees, Hal advised the folks that the job was for the county arborist. Don't touch them. Hal loved music, especially piano and opera, and in fair weather he would open the front windows and door, and we all enjoyed the music he played on the stereo or on his piano. In addition to gourmet meals, Hal enjoyed fine wines, and when he saw a sale, he'd ask if we could split a case. We enjoy nice wines too. We then alternated hosting wine and cheese tastings on our respective decks. Speaking of wines, the family is hosting the celebration of life and wanted to emphasize the celebration aspect. In that context, I brought a little bubbly to get the party started. I apologize, I didn't mean to make such a loud pop, or such a liquidy one. I do know the proper way to open it just to ease the cork out. Sorry, Abby, I'll clean up later.
Thank you, Marty and Jim. Don't worry about it. Hal will make you pay. He loved this church. We now hear "How Lovely Is Thy Dwelling Place" from a German requiem by Johannes Brahms, offered by our Cedar Lane Choir as a tribute to Harold's deep love of music, his long-standing involvement with the choir, and the spiritual home that he helped build here.
between all the beautiful music and Jim Caskey's bubbly, I don't know if I have anything to give that can be better. Like many of you here today, I too was a former student of Harold Quayle's at Wheaton High School. And like many of you, as we transitioned from being student and teacher to being just friends, we likely found it a little bit awkward when he asked us to stop calling him Mr. Quayle, and rather to just refer to him as Hal. But it should come as no surprise to me or anyone else here that many of us probably grappled with letting go that show of reverence, and so we settled simply with calling him HQ. If you told me back in the mid-'80s that one day HQ and I would share an enduring friendship, I would likely have scoffed at that. I had only taken 1 year of high school photography with HQ, opting out instead of taking his advanced photography class, and instead pursuing speech and debate. I didn't get to go onto the field trip to the Quayle family cabin to take pictures in the wilderness. I really wasn't a standout student, surely not what anyone would refer to as most likely to succeed material. In fact, I distinctly recall once being scolded by HQ for talking a little too much in class. And like any impetuous, petty teenager, I remember thinking that the orange sweater he used to wear all the time reminded me of a pumpkin. The first thing that he taught us in photography class was how to make a camera out of a shoebox. With only a pinhole of light coming in at the end of the box, we were able to capture an image onto the film inside, then develop and transfer it to create our first photo. As our lessons progressed, he taught us how to recognize the small glimpses of beauty caught within the expanse of our field of vision. Just little moments in the contrast of light and color, which are otherwise lost as we span our attention to the greater surroundings. At the time, I would never have imagined that these lessons would have so deeply imprinted themselves within us. I mean, surely algebra would have embedded itself to be a more useful tool in our adult lives. I don't mean to be busting on algebra in case anyone here today is an old math teacher colleague. I'm just saying I've never seen anyone post algebra equations on social media. I'm pretty sure HQ's teaching legacy is intact there. We really didn't have much contact at all after graduating in '86. There were a couple of missed opportunities to reunite with him. Once, shortly after my own father had passed, I had come home from work and my family had said that he had stopped by to bring some daffodils and to pay his respects. And another time in 2004, after having left my job at the vet hospital, I was told that he had stopped by looking for me. And it wasn't until 2009, of all things, that I found him on Facebook. I happened to search his name and saw Harold Quayle, and I messaged him asking him if he was the Harold Quayle. And of course, that was the beginning of our friendship. Of all things, I have social media to thank for finding him again. Our interactions really weren't that frequent in the beginning. Periodically, the ladies, also from the class of '86, and I would have brunch at Forest Sedgwick. If we were lucky enough, we would catch in time for the cherry blossoms to be in bloom. We would exchange news of our life events, great-grandbabies, when Martha became ill, the loss of my brother. I remember popping into Shady Grove Hospital when Martha was hospitalized, and I could remember seeing the anguish of the moment hanging on him. But even in a moment when hope was dwindling, I could see how much he loved her, and why not? Behind all those wires, the oxygen hose, even under the harsh hospital lighting, when she smiled, she was radiant. He told me once, during Martha's memorial service, also held here in this beautiful setting, when he had seen us, that he was so touched that he started to tear up. And I found it funny that he said that he would be so touched by everyone else's kindness and yet never recognize his own expressions of friendship and kindness. He never remembered that he even brought flowers to my family home after my father's passing, and he actually had to be reminded that he once popped by our friend Karen Schulman's father's memorial service. He didn't highlight his own acts of kindness as though they were just kind of muddled in some banal routine of just being just an inherently good person. After Martha's passing, he was always up for throwing back a few dozen or two of shucked oysters. He said he didn't have anyone willing to readily eat oysters with, so of course I was very happy to oblige. To which Liza, his daughter Liza, would say, "That's all you are." And it's funny that Rice brought up those Totten Inlet Virginicas, because those were the moments over those trays of bivalves is when I discovered his cheeky side. He once tried to secure some Totten Inlet Virginicas, but they were hard to find because they were a bit select and oftentimes sold out to restaurants first. But he said he wanted to scheme by writing a letter to them saying that, and I quote, "Hope they would consider selling him some so he could relive a loving memory of his dearly departed wife." And I told him, absolutely not. I cannot condone you using Martha's memory to score oysters, of all things. And he just gave me this cheeky grin. As the pandemic slowed down, so too did he. And by that, I only mean that he was just having a harder time getting around. We had this fun-filled all-day outing, which we had coined the HQ and WA Day of Adventure. We started with breakfast at the Mosaic Cafe, spent some time at the Glenstone Museum, where we talked about our favorite picture exhibits and why. We watched the opera Johnny Schicchi at his house, and then Ubered down to the DC Wharf, and of course, had an oyster dinner. And after all that, he wanted to watch yet another opera. I had to politely decline. I was exhausted. We slowly transitioned our visits to having dinner instead of going out to having dinner at Forest Sedgwick. Mostly, we'd just get some takeout and just either watch opera or just sit and talk. And it was one of those nights when he sat me down before dinner and told me about his diagnosis. And in the haze of trying to absorb what he was telling me, I remember only responding with, "There will be plenty of time for me to be sad. I think we shouldn't waste even 1 minute of it being sad while we're hanging out together." And then he gave me another one of those cheeky grins, and he just said, "Okay." Something unexpected happened after he was gone. What I didn't see coming was that in those quiet moments, either alone in the car or having an odd introspective moment, usually at the most inappropriate moment, say at work, when an aria would play over Pandora radio, that I would smile. And I would smile when I thought of him. And it wasn't sadness that I felt, but rather a comforting joy for having an opportunity to have shared a friendship with him. And maybe it comes from some tragic muscle memory that we build as we all grow older and experience more loss of our loved ones. Our grief is no less painful, but perhaps more predictable. We are more knowing of its timetable. We recognize more quickly how to manage our loss and are more understanding and open to embracing that those we've lost have indelibly imprinted themselves in our philosophies and our moralities. So maybe that's why I smile when I think about HQ now. So thanks, HQ. Thanks for teaching us that the smallest pinhole of light can capture the beauty of a moment in our lives. But as I'm looking onto the faces of those who are here to celebrate your life, I must say that the aperture of a mere pinhole is just simply not large enough to capture all those here that you have loved and who have loved you. I'll be sure to find those Totten Inlet oysters one day. I'll finally catch up on that third act of Wagner's Valkyrie and the Ring Cycle opera that we just never got around to watch. And I will toast you, my dear friend, you and your cheeky grin.
Hi, I'm Ingrid Brown, and I am from the Wheaton High School class of 1981. And I realized after seeing everybody and hearing all these things today, I really had just a snippet of Mr. Quayle, which I still call him Mr. I tried to adopt the HQ thing. I just couldn't do it. I thought that was great. Mr. Quayle was my photography teacher. Apparently, I got him right when he started going full-time photography. And I had him all through high school. I took every photography course there was, and when we ran out of photography courses, he put me on the yearbook. He just let me come to the darkroom. He was amazing and just let me continue with the craft that he was teaching me. He was my happy place, and he is the reason I made it through high school. So, one thing about him, in his kindness, he always tried to find a nice way to say things. And I remember one time I took a picture. I had to take pictures of the preschool kids in a program. And I handed in one that was clearly out of focus. It was not very good. And he gave it back to me with a note that said, well, I really like the soft lighting and that soft focus that you use. That was really good. He always did that. Whatever you did, he found a way to say something good about it. And I was not easy. A lot of times before his class, I would have lunch break and we would go off campus and go to McDonald's and get things. I would bring him back French fries because I was always late. And he liked the French fries, but he still gave me detention. And that was okay because that just gave me more time to hang out with him after school and organize the lab and clean up the dark room. So I graduated and life happened. We lost touch. And just like Wah said, the social media, love it or hate it, it does give you the opportunity to reconnect. So we became friends on Facebook again. And one day, it was World Photography Day, and I work in an elementary school. And we had been talking about what teacher inspired you. And I couldn't stop talking about him at the meeting. And so I was like, you know what, I'm going to give him a shout out. So I just posted something on social media and I said, thank you. And he was so touched. It's so true. He was the best teacher I ever had. So we reconnected and I really started to work on my photography craft and I would post things and he would make comments or he'd email me and ask me questions. And I knew that he was really looking at my work because he always had something to say, like, look at the way the light is, look at the way the arc of that branch is. And he was my biggest fan, for sure. And when he liked my pictures on social media, it was like getting an A in the class. Mr. Quayle liked my photo. So it took a while, but we finally did reconnect in person, and I went to see him sometimes, and he would talk to me about things I had no idea. He loved his wife, and he would tell me stories about when they first met in their early years. He talked about his kids and his grandkids and the camping trips and places I had to put on my bucket list to go. And he talked about the opera. Again, I didn't know anything about opera. I still don't. He never could get me to do the opera thing. But he told me about all the people he loved with his chamber music and all the friends he had made. And I knew it meant so much to him, so I tried really hard to like the stuff. He also talked a lot about his previous photography students or other photography students, and I know that he was just so proud of the work that we did. The last thing, this is short, I know, but everybody said so many great things about him. The last thing, he gave me some advice very early in my journey with photography, and he said, whenever you go somewhere, whenever you're on a journey or you're walking or you're doing anything, he goes, take the time to turn around and see where you came from. Turn around and look, because that will give you a different perspective, and it could be really beautiful. So I hope that he is looking back at all of us gathered here for him, and he can see how much he meant to all of us. So, thank you.
Thank you all for your beautiful remembrances of Hal. The philosopher George Santayana once wrote, "To see things under the form of eternity is to see them in their historic and moral truth. Not that as they seemed when they passed, but as they remain when they are over. When a man's life is over, it remains true that he has lived. It remains true that he has been one sort of man and not another. In the infinite mosaic of history, that bit has its unfading color and its perpetual function and effect. The truth of his life remains." And so today we hold close the many truths of Harold Quayle Jr.'s life. Not just the events, the years, or the milestones, but the enduring truths that shaped who he was and how he loved. The truth of his steadfast, generous spirit, rooted in deep curiosity, humility, and compassion. The truth of his love for his family, his children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, held with a quiet pride and a tenderness that never needed to be declared out loud but was always felt. The truth of his devotion to Cedar Lane, this community that he and Martha joined more than 6 decades ago, and into which he poured his time, his music, his thoughtfulness, his love of food and fellowship, his generosity, and his deeply rooted values of equity, kindness, and justice. The truth of his vocation as a teacher, where he brought not only academic excellence, but also a deep commitment to the shaping of character. Hal once wrote about his philosophy of education. What do we teach the young? What do we hope they will learn? We teach them practical skills, academic skills, artistic skills, but if they do not master the skills involved in sharing their environment with other people, skills of tolerance and understanding, they will have contributed little to the improvement of the community. Harold understood that education at its best is not just about facts. It is about forming whole human beings who can live with wisdom and care. And then there is the truth that radiated most clearly in his life, the deep, enduring love he shared with Martha, a love that blossomed in a summer cafeteria at UVA, endured through separation and service, and grew deeper and broader over more than 6 decades of marriage. Harold and Martha were partners in every sense, traveling, raising children, filling their home with art and music, sharing long conversations and quiet companionship. They built a life that was full of meaning, beauty, and shared purpose. Harold's grief at Martha's passing was deep, And yet in that sorrow, he carried her presence with care and grace. He kept her memory alive in the rhythms of music they both loved, in the art that still graced their home, and in the faces of the family they created together. Hal gave generously to his students, to this congregation, to this community, and to the causes of justice and equity he held dear. But perhaps his greatest gift was simply the way he lived, with quiet conviction, with loyalty and love, and with a kind of inner light that revealed the beauty within him and around him. It is fitting then to remember that in the final act of La Bohème, an opera that Harold cherished among many, the music carries both heartbreak and grace. As the characters gather around a dying friend, their love does not stop the inevitable, but it surrounds her with beauty, memory, and care. And in the same way, we cannot hold back the passage of time. But we can, like Hal did, fill our days with music, with love, with the kind of presence that makes life luminous for others. So let us remember Harold Quayle Jr. with gratitude for the songs he sang, the meals he cooked, the oysters he shucked, the letters he wrote, the photographs he framed, and the better world he helped shape through his presence and care. And let us carry him with us in this blessing attributed to William Henry Channing, to laugh often and love much, to win and hold the respect of intelligent persons and the affection of little children, to appreciate beauty always, to have sought for and found the best in others, and to have given it oneself, to leave the world better than one found it, and go down to dust and dreams, knowing that even a single life breathes easier because we have lived well. This is to have succeeded. Harold Quayle Jr. lived well. The truths of his life remain in his family, in his students, in his beloved Cedar Lane, and in each of us who were lucky enough to know him. So go gently, Hal. Go with love. You have indeed succeeded. Amen. After the postlude, for which you are invited to remain seated, we will gather in the fellowship hall, which is the back of the sanctuary, for some refreshments and more telling of Hal's stories. And also, the family has very generously brought some of Hal's music collection, which is laid out in the lobby for you all to take some home, which is in some ways taking some of Hal home with us.